Yes. Okay, welcome everyone to the final week of Platonic Love, week 6. It's Tuesday the 13th of October, and we're looking at the Phaedrus, page 269 to 279, and we're doing Rhetoric for Philosophy. Before we get started, I'll just remind everyone that we've got the Twilight sessions, which are coming up. You are able to book those on the website, and that would be for Plato and Christianity, and also the Reading Plato Introduction course, which everyone here has done before, but if they have any friends that might want to do it, those are available. After this class, so maybe tomorrow morning-ish, I'm going to send around a survey, just a feedback survey for the Platonic Love class. If you've got a spare few minutes, just fill it out. Mostly it's multiple choice questions, just to help us kind of refine the courses as we go. And stick around after the class because we have a very special announcement, which we're excited to share with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we do
during
have
drinks.
to say.
Oh, stay tuned.
Yeah. So you'll have to stay now. But hopefully. Now, there's actually I've actually got a lot today. It's terrible. I got a lot today because I'm really going to try and bring it all together, bring this dialogue all together. It might be a bit ambitious before drinks, but we'll see how we go. So just going to try and bring that all together, and then we can stop for wine hopefully around 7:30 and chat about that and chat about other things, and also David's big surprise. Okay, so put your thinking hats on, and we're going to dive right into it now, and I'll just see how I go, and then maybe I'll stop if I get too far and my mouth gets dry and I need to have a break, but we'll see how we go. So I'm just going to really try and bring this dialogue all together. All right. So we're under the tree by the stream. Phaedrus is reading Lysias's speech. The speech takes the form of a suitor making a case to a boy. You should take me as a lover because I'm not in love with you. When Phaedrus finishes the speech, Socrates is challenged to make a better speech on the same topic. So that's how we get these two speeches with the common theme. The lover is driven mad with irrational passion, which can be damaging, especially for the beloved. Now, in Socrates' speech, love is defined as a kind of desire. And then he says here, there are two principles in us: innate desire for pleasure, irrational, leading to excess; acquired conviction, striving for the best, which is rational, resulting in self-control. When irrational desire for pleasure dominates, it can be directed towards different types of pleasure: pleasure in food, pleasure in booze, and so forth, sensual pleasures. Now, one of these pleasures is pleasure in beauty. So now we have this definition of love: pleasure derived from beauty, physical beauty, reinforced by lowly appetites. Now, this love for the beloved is like a wolf's love of a lamb. So boys, beware. Okay, so we've got those two speeches, and then we come to this little interlude where Socrates finishes his speech, but he's filled with remorse, much as a lover might be filled with remorse in the previous speech when he falls out of love. So Socrates is filled with remorse for disparaging the divine eros. He must make atonement with another speech, a so-called palinode. Okay, so the second speech of Socrates. In this speech, Socrates says, yes, the lover behaves compulsively, irrationally, madly. But this is no ordinary madness. It's divine madness. The lover's madness is a species of divine possession. So while in the first speech, the lover was derided as out of his mind, insane, Socrates now spins this around and says true love is a case where ordinary madness has been confused with the madness of enthusiasm, having God within, being filled with God. And then he gives these 4 types of such enthusiasm, of such divine madness. So he's distinguished between human madness and divine madness, and then he gives these 4 types. The 4 types are prophetic madness of the prophet, the mystical madness of Dionysus, possession by the muse in making music, and our madness, the madness of the lover. Now, all these types of mania or frenzy are gifts from the god, including love mania, which is not harmful, but beneficial to both lover and beloved. So it has the opposite effect on the beloved. So, in order to give account of this divine love mania, Socrates must first make a large digression. This is because love is a condition of the soul, and so he must first give an account of the soul, both human and divine. So now we're having this account of soul, psyche, and he starts off with psyche in general, okay, and says that this is self-moving or self-changing. Socrates begins by talking about it in general. Now, if you're a medievalist, you might think anima mundi, the world soul. But if you're one of those nature documentary types, then it's kind of like David Attenborough's Life on Earth. And when you ask the question, what is life? What is life in itself? How does life go on and go on regenerating itself, differentiating itself? How did it begin? In principle, there must be an origin to life. Plato says it's autonomous and self-moving and self-creating. So psyche, as in the spirit of life, if you like, is self-changing. It's autonomous in its origins, and in principle, it never ceases. When this life force is in the physical body, it moves the body. No living stuff moves, non-living stuff does not move itself. It's moved by living. So, you know, like we just think of, you know, when an animal dies or when a person dies, the physical body is limp. It's now just a pile of well-organized, lifeless stuff, molecules, whatever you want to call it. But the life force, the psyche, is passed on to its offspring. So if you ever read that section again, have a look at it again and think of it a bit more in that way. You know, you might miss me saying psyche, but, you know, it's this kind of life force that he's talking about.
Was that Socrates' first speech, was it?
This is in, no, the second speech. This is in the second speech, before we go into the winged chariot thing. Okay, so anyway, after showing that psyche is immortal in this way, Socrates continues in his preliminary discussion of the nature of the soul. This is a preliminary to talking about what is this special type of divine love. So he needs to give account of the human soul, but he can't. He can't give an account because such higher truths are beyond description. So those who've done the Republic remember the allegorical section. It's the same sort of thing. However, something of the nature of the psyche can be shown in a figure, in an image, in an allegory. And so this is where we get the allegory of the winged chariot. Now, I'm just going to highlight a few things from Maria's account last week. so it won't do the whole lot. Psyche per se, world, soul, universal life, has the care of all the other, everything else that is soulless. Individual souls are imagined as a two-horse chariot winging through the heavens. For the gods, both horses are good. For the humans, one is good and one is problematic. When a human psyche loses their wings, they fall down and become encased in body. So how does it lose its wings? Wings are nourished by the form of beauty, wisdom, goodness, etc. In the revolution of the heaven, divine souls get to fully see the sight of these forms in the region beyond the heavens, and they're nourished by this sight. Whereas good human souls just get a glimpse of this reality beyond the heaven. Not so good human souls don't get very much, and they circle below striving to get a glimpse, but they are caught up in clashes and confusions. Wings are broken. Souls fall into bodily form. So when those embodied souls that manage to get some vague glimpse of the forms end up in human forms. They're not animals. And this explains how knowledge as remembering works. Remember knowledge as remembering the forms that you knew in your previous lives. While journeying around the heaven with your God, you look down and see the sensible world and look up at the forms and see the connection between the two. See how they participate. Sensible things participate in the forms. So in our bodily life, the extent to which we remember the formal nature of things varies. True philosophers awaken their awareness, applying themselves to the forms, and this nourishes them, and their wings start to grow. But while the philosopher gives all his attention to the divine, he appears out of his wits. Folks don't realize that he's not mad, but possessed by the gods, enthusiastic. And so finally, this brings us back to the account of that type of divine madness, the fourth type of madness, the madness called divine love. The lover's enthusiasm for the divine comes from remembering the insensible form of beauty when he sees sensible beauty. His mind's eye gazes upward, neglecting things below, which makes him appear mad. Anyone who loves beauty and partakes in this madness is a lover. So it's a new definition of the lover. Although not all become lovers to the same degree. Some don't remember so well the form of beauty. When they see beautiful things, some can't see beyond the sensual expression of them, and so they give themselves over to mere sensual pleasure. When the lover sees a beautiful face, he worships it like a god. When he gets hot and erotically excited, which makes his feathers grow, sometimes his love is frustrated and the feathers' openings close up, blocking the flood of longing below the surface. This pent-up desire drives the lover to madness, a mixture of pleasure and pain. He is enthused with eros. He behaves obsessively. His love sickness can only be treated by the beloved, and sex provides only temporary relief. The lover sees in his beloved the God he once found on his heavenly journey, and he tries to make his beloved as alike as possible to that God. In this way, the lover effects a glorious and happy initiation on his beloved. Now, that's the good story, but it doesn't always go so well because of the dark horse. There are two conflicting responses to beauty, the beautiful boy, expressed by the behavior of the two horse-drawn chariot. The two love manias of Socrates' first speech and the second speech, so the love mania in the first speech and then in the second speech, can be related to the chariot's two horses. Now remember, there was the charioteer reason driving the chariot, and then there was the good white horse striving for honor, restraint, and modesty. And then there's the bad dark horse, barely controllable by the whip, aiming for pure excess. This dark horse is aligned with ordinary human desire, as in the first speech. When the lover sees the beloved and is stirred with desire, the good horse is constrained by shame and holds back and the other one, the bad horse, heedlessly rushes forward, baying for sex. A struggle ensures within the soul. If the bad horse is subdued, then the boy is slowly seduced into a Platonic friendship involving companionship, conversation, and philosophy. The lover sees divinity in his beloved and shows him immense goodwill. The beloved soon reciprocates the lover's love, and some of this rebounds back onto himself. He does not realize that he is seeing himself in his lover as in a mirror, as Socrates says. He is experiencing a counter love, which is the reflection of the love he inspired, but sees it only as friendship. So, in conclusion, Socrates gets back to addressing this boy and says, compare the enriching experience with what you might expect from a non-lover. From him, you will receive only false virtue and be condemned to the cycle of the afterlife devoid of wisdom. Why on earth would you want that? Okay, so that's got us up to the end of last week's reading, and I hope that was helpful and brought things together a bit. Does anyone want to just any issues raised up there that people want to mention?
Yeah, I have a question because I wasn't very clear as to actually what happens. I mean, I read that the lover subjugates the black horse, right? So is that then, and yes, there is the friendship, and that's where it stays. There is no physical love. The way that I read it, Plato almost denounces the physical love. Did I read correctly? And then he says, if it's but sometimes when the temptation is too much, then you give in. I think somebody said last week, Plato wanted the pie and to eat it as well. And I remember that. I can't remember, apologies, who said it, but rereading it again, I got confused and oh yeah, this is what happens. So is the divine madness, according to Plato, something really, excuse the pun, Platonic?
Does anyone else want to have a go at answering that? I think there's a couple of contradictions. I think there are some contradictions in there, but and there's one in particular that really annoyed me, which is related, which is about getting glimpses. I thought some people that some souls that fell down didn't get glimpses, but they had to get glimpses or something. But anyway, I think Maria, probably the important point is to say that he's downplaying the physical. And there's a point at which he gives the two levels, like, oh, if you have no sex at all, I think this is a bit further on, is it? Where you have no sex at all, then, you know, that's great, you get full points. But then if you're giving and have a little bit of sex, well, that's not too bad. Just keep your eye on the
and something similar appears in the Phaedrus as well, where it's as if he denounces, like the philosopher is in love with philosophy and does not need anything else. Obviously, he doesn't expand it as he did here, but yeah, it's not a clear message. It's a bit of this and a bit of that. Don't get me wrong, beautifully written, but yeah. Thank you.
This is some more plot work. Yeah. Consistency, continuity. People need to come in. Yeah. Okay, anyone else got something?
This is the section where he talks about feathers and penises, and which might give a clue, but also 251C talks about the state of the soul, the man beginning to sprout wings. But then he says it throbs and aches and tickles as it grows its feathers. So when it gazes at the boy's beauty, is now nourished and warmed by receiving particles which come into it in a flood from then. Hence, of course, the name we give them is desire. So he uses all the analogy and he uses all the terminology. I think there's a bit of sex in there, sort of, you know?
Yes, but further down, he writes as well. He subjugates the horses, and the black horse does not dive into the beloved. So yeah, I know it's.
But just under that 254, he talks about move towards the beloved and mention to him the delights of sex. So maybe it is. At the start, two of them resist, indignant at the idea of being forced to do terrible, improper things. But then there's no limit to the trouble it causes. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, and 253 to 256 have written down the Anderes in his soul, and of the special felicity of a pair who are proof against the temptations of carnal lust, leading to the life of philosopher. So, yeah.
Okay. So interesting stuff. So, anyone else got anything before we move on that section? We've actually got right to the middle of the dialogue. I learned that from, of all people, Jacques Derrida. I had a bit of a look at his Plato's Pharmacy, just to see. I hadn't read it for like 30 years. It was amazing. But it's actually, so he's into this stuff as well. Did anyone read my post? Oh, Jackie read my post on Facebook. Did you listen to the, oh, you've listened to it, Effie. Right, okay. Yeah, so it's this stuff in the Republic where the discussion of the divided line occurs smack right in at the golden mean if you put the Republic physically all in one line, the same number of words on every page or whatever, right at the golden mean is the discussion of the divided line, which suggests the divided line is golden mean. That's a secret. But anyway, Derrida, who's not into this stuff at all, said that this next section, which is not in the reading, starts right in the middle of the dialogue, which is kind of interesting because I kind of think of it as the end because it's all about all that love stuff. And then we switch to this new topic. So did anyone read the in-between? Any nodding heads? Oh, Effie read it? Yeah, anyone else read the in-between? Yeah, of course, Maria. Okay, it's quite interesting. It would have been hard going to read the whole lot if you weren't up for it. So, you know, maybe go back and read it, but I'll give you a bit of a summary, and it might encourage you to read it. So I'll give you that now, and then I'll probably just move straight into the reading section, and then, I'm going to have a glass of red wine. Okay, so right halfway through the dialogue, there's this big switch. So how does it and then we come back to love, but it is a big switch, and he's putting in some new stuff here that you feel like he really wants to raise. So so Phaedrus says, well, that was an immensely superior speech to Lysias's and your earlier one, so that's great. But I wonder if Lysias will actually try to rise up and match it, because the Greeks are so competitive. But he's not so sure, because Lysias might be giving up speech writing altogether. Someone had a go at him for being a speech writer, that it's not very becoming to the modern man. Speech writing is something that one should be ashamed of, and posterity might think of you as a sophist. Plato says, rubbish, like think of legislation. It's no more than speech writing. When a statesman writes a bill to put it before the Senate, they're proud when it's written into law. How's that different from speech writing? And think, those people who write great laws like Solon for Athens live on forever in fame for their writing. So speech writing's okay. The thing is that there's two sorts of speech writing: good speech writing and bad speech writing. So here we are. We've got this new topic. What makes good speech writing? But hang on. There's this interlude. What is it? It's the hottest part of the day. It's siesta time, and the cicadas sing people to sleep at this time of the day. Legend has it, cicadas were once humans obsessively in love with music. Now their job is to tell the muses how folks honor them through dancing, through love affairs, and philosophy. So it is a high pleasure to discourse, to discuss philosophy, and that's one thing. But now there is this other reason to continue with our discourse. Philosophers sing the sweetest songs to the muses. Right, so we got that. People have written essays about that. I don't know, I'd love to read them and see what's in it. So let's get on with the discourse. Remember, we were asking, what makes good speech writing? So this is logography, logos and writing, grapho, or whatever the word is. Okay, so Phaedrus says that you only need to pay attention to what seems right in speech writing, because you're only working with public opinion. The truth does not matter. So we think about Gorgias here. There's a dialogue Gorgias, and this is discussed. No, says Socrates, you need knowledge of truth. Otherwise, you will be misled just as much as you mislead others who you're trying to persuade. And you need to know the truth, even when your intent is deception. Knowing the truth is a precondition for all persuasion. So, dear Phaedrus, you should engage in philosophy if you want to be a good speechwriter. So this then brings the question, is rhetoric an art? Is there an art of persuasion? So it's kind of shifted generally to rhetoric and to persuasion. What this is all about, this speech writing and everything, this type of, this genre of writing is persuasion. Okay, and the opposite word here, which comes up a lot here and in Aristotle, is techne, which is translated as science, but very often translated as art. I can kind of see why they've chosen science. In the modern day, we don't think of arts as being techne. And the opposite, the sometimes turns up here and elsewhere is tribi, I think, it's spelled tribe, tribi, which means knack, like, and it's translated, I think, as craft here. So it's like learning a trick, learning something by habit, just learning how to, you know, do a backflip or something like that, or ride a bike. Okay, so at page 260e, Socrates argues that there is no art of persuasion if it does not take into account the truth. And yes, it is an art, and it's the art of leading the soul by means of speech. So there's his definition. Phaedrus says that speech is only for persuasion in the courts and senate, but Socrates wants to make a more general idea of speech and speech writing. The art of persuasion can make the same thing appear to be one of one kind and then the opposite. A good rhetorician can argue one side of the argument persuasively and then just as persuasively argue the opposite. He can argue that something is just and then that it's unjust. Now, we've inherited the adversarial system in our courts and in our parliament, so we know exactly what that's all about. People who are good at that in the courts and in the parliament can do that. So to do this, you need to be very clear about the grades of difference in likeness, going stage by stage when you want to present the opposite of what is actually true. He who is to deceive another and is not to be deceived himself must know accurately the similarity and dissimilarity of things. This is not only in the courts, but consider also the Eleatic Palamedes. Palamedes will persuade one way and then the other, that the like is like, and then that it is unlike, that the one is one, and then that the one is many, that rest is motion. Now here, just as an aside, this is all in the Parmenides, these discussions, which I'd never noticed before. So behind the Eleatic that's referred to here, we don't know anything about, is Parmenides and Zeno as presented in Plato's dialogue, the Parmenides, which maybe one day we will address in the Platonic Academy. It's difficult. Okay, but Socrates points to just such a situation in this actual dialogue. Socrates says that he has done this himself. Think about it. First of all, the non-lover should be favored. And then, second speech, the lover should be favored. The lover is bad for the beloved. A lover is the greatest blessing for the beloved. Socrates perhaps knew all along the underlying distinction between madness, human and divine. His first speech had been persuasively deceptive by taking the one as the other. That's the implication anyway. Here Socrates introduces the dialectic method of division and distinction. I've actually written a lot about this, and it's something that is elaborated much more in a slightly later dialogue called The Sophist, and I hope one day we will read that dialogue. But anyway, briefly here, the method is quite simple. Don't think of it as anything elaborate. It's very simple. It has two principles: collection or bringing together, and division. Collection is finding what's common in different particulars. Division is finding the right place to make the distinction between things. This is to use the elementary form that, remember, we discussed in our reading Plato, between like and unlike, which comes down to equal, unequal. Now, to help you here, think about a classification system. Think about the classification of plants, which come down to finding what is common between them and finding out where to make the right distinctions. Is it a leaf, or is it a leaf looking like a petal? Where do I define the difference between the two species or genus and so on? It's about collecting bringing together and making the division in the right place. And Socrates compares this to being a good carver, knowing where, or a butcher, knowing where to make the cut by finding the joints under the skin. In this discussion of love, the divisions are, both types of love are mad, so it's madness. And then there's the two types of madness, of love madness, the human disease and the divine madness. Now, this divine madness has 4 divisions, and one of those 4 divisions is the madness of divine love. So he calls this method here actually the method of dialectic. So here we get a definition of his method of dialectic, and it's narrowed down to not just being, let's just chat and find definitions. But here, we still need to find the definition of rhetoric. Returning to this problem with the new methodological tool, they go through all the different techniques and devices that rhetoricians use. But this is not the art. You can have these methods, but not know how to apply them. And he compares it with medicine. Like you might know that the drug that makes folks warm, the drug that makes them cold, the drug that makes them vomit, that makes them shit, like you've read it in a book. These are the preliminary skills to the physician's art. But what you don't know is how to diagnose when to give what treatment. Similar examples he goes through about the art of writing tragedy and the art of music. Actually, great rhetoricians are like Pericles. They have a philosophical foundation, and that is what rhetoric needs. Philosophical training, as he said earlier, first you need to know the truth through philosophy before you can persuade, even persuading to falsehood. So now we finally get to our reading. Just before drinks, we're going to get to our reading. Okay, so the method of the art of healing, right, is like rhetoric. One is to do with the body, the other is to do with the soul. The art of healing uses drugs to heal and strengthen the body. Discourse and training gives good beliefs and virtue to the soul. The rhetorician must know the soul well because his purpose is to try to produce conviction in the soul. Produce conviction in the soul. But not all souls are the same. There are different kinds in different conditions. To persuade different kinds of souls requires different rhetorical techniques, just as there are different medical treatments for different people with different ailments. Knowing the truth is important even with deception. So Phaedrus comes back with this thing about conventional view is not to bother about this because folks only care about what is probable. That is all they're concerned with, and that's all we need to be concerned with. In the law courts, it's better to defend with a believable story, even when a less believable thing actually happened. Like when a weak man mugs a strong man. No one would believe that. So it's best not to even tell the truth. But Socrates says to deceive well, you must actually know the truth. In fact, to be a good rhetorician, even at deceiving people, you must first be a good philosopher, a dialectician, correct collection and division, knowing the true divisions. And then secondly, to have good knowledge of the soul and to know their different characteristics. This approach should be taken to gratify the gods. If you do so to gratify the gods, then the spin-off is that you'll achieve your immediate lowly aim, which is persuasion. Now we get to what Derrida loves, which is the Egyptian myth about the letters. So we get onto the section that discusses writing, that particular form of logos as a script. Okay, which is, which we have already been discussing, but he's now trying to draw it out and criticize it. So it's a myth from Egypt, well, from the dream time of Egypt. The great inventor Thirth invented arithmetic. I got them in different order in my book. Arithmetic, logistic, which I might have already mentioned, geometry and astronomy, also drafts and dice, and letters for writing. When he took letters to his god king, saying that they would make, he said that they would make folks wiser and improve their memory. In fact, says the god king, they have the opposite effect. They will foster forgetfulness by giving external reminders and the appearance of wisdom in the place of true wisdom. For they will read many things without understanding. Socrates says that there are only two purposes for writing. One, to remind you of what you already knew, and for amusement. Writing is like drawing a portrait. It does not respond to questions when you ask it what it means by what it says. It knows not to whom it speaks. What type of soul are they? The written word can be misinterpreted and ill-treated or unjustly criticized. There is another kind of logos that is written with intelligence in the soul of the learner. This is the living, ensouled, formal logos of he who knows, of which the written speech is but an image. I was going to read out that section, but I'll probably leave that out. It's a wonderful section around, it starts at 275D, but I'll leave that, or maybe we can read it later. It's very important. Okay, so then we get on to this hothouse sort of idea about writing. So he says that for those who have knowledge of the just and the good and the beautiful, who have this higher knowledge, writing is like putting your ideas in like treating them like hothouse flowers, putting them in a hothouse, which is fine for amusement, but they can't defend themselves by argument and can't teach the truth effectively. So writing is nice for amusement and as a reminder. And it's like an image. Remember, sensible things remind you of the forms? We can talk about that later. But far better is the serious discourse employing the dialectic method, planting the intelligent logos in a fitting soul, which is able to help itself and spring forth and continue to grow by itself. And this makes the possessor happiest. So this brings us right back to the beginning of the section on rhetoric, and in fact to the beginning of our dialogue. To the bagging of Lysias for being a speechwriter and to the previous speeches on love. In the art of speech, one must know the truth about what he writes, must be able to define everything using the method of division, understand the nature of the soul, and find the classes of speech adapted to the various soul natures. If he composes his writing with knowledge of truth and is able to, this is, page 278C. If he composes his writing with knowledge of the truth and is able to support them with discussion and can show by his speech that the written words are of little worth, such a man or to derive his title not from such writing, but from the serious pursuit that underlies it. Which is the love of wisdom. That is the philosopher. That's the serious pursuit. And so this brings us back to the finally to the theme of love, and that the pursuit of wisdom is the higher goal of the lover. And that's the end. So we got through it, and before drinks time, so that's good. Should we start drinks early? Can I go and get my drink now? All right, okay. I'll go and get my drink now, and then we can have some questions on that, and then whatever. Yeah, whatever we want. Okay, so I'll be back in a sec.
He's really going for the drink.
Well, cheers, everybody.
Yeah. Oh, cheers. All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. Or should we wait for the boss?
Yeah, let's wait.
Yeah,
for
we
the
will.
boss. Let's wait for the boss.
Was it just me, or were people thinking of Donald Trump while all that was happening? You know, the rhetoric, but, you know, the most important thing, not necessarily, you need to know what the truth is, but that's just not necessarily what you say is the truth. Like, I suppose that's assuming Donald Trump knows what truth is, but...
Well,
Yeah, right.
Sorry, guys. Just because I'm still here for a while, I'm a really big Trump fan. And I just like to enjoy a few drinks, and I'll leave early, and you guys can go for it after that. How does that sound?
No, this is a Trump-free zone. This is a Trump-free zone. I just heard
No,
that.
I'm happy. I have to leave at 7:30 anyway, so I'm happy to just.
Do you,
enjoy
Effie?
a
All right.
few
Well, do you
drinks.
have a question? You can, if you've got something you want to say,
ask a
you've got
question.
priority.
No, actually, not really. It's not relevant to the reading, but there was one bit where he mentions Byzantine, and I was kind of taken aback because I always thought the Byzantine came way after Plato.
No, Byzantium was actually like another, like a colony, Byzantium.
Yeah, but even wasn't that founded with Roman rule?
No.
Was it longer than that?
Yeah,
Constantinople
it was in the ancient times, and then Constantine built.
Yeah, no, I know
Constantinople.
Constantine came 300 AD, but I thought
Yeah.
Byzantine was like 300 BC or something.
No, the Byzantium, the
town.
city, the town was.
How long ago? Do you know when it was founded? Because he actually says he had like writers.
Yeah, there is a guy there who, a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, the main thing is, I suppose, Effie, that there were Greeks in that region.
Yeah.
There were Greeks in that region. Yeah.
Oh,
I
was
didn't
really
look in to see
surprised
if
at that.
it
Oh, yeah, there were Greeks in that region.
was.
No, I'm sure there was. I just didn't realise the name Byzantine.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised
was
too.
all the way from
Mm.
550 BC. Like I thought it was somewhere around 300 BC that it was founded for 600 years and then changed names.
Does it mean anything in Greek, Byzantine?
Byzantium? No,
Doesn't it mean
it could be.
a sucker or something?
Yeah, like breastfeeding, you know.
S-U-C-C-O-U-R, as in S-U-C-C-O-U-R.
The mammary gland, but yeah.
Wait, so it's a Greek word or is it Latin, Byzantine?
No, it's Greek.
It's Greek, okay. Yeah.
I can't
The
believe
Latins were not there. Well, they were not as prominent, during this.
I can't believe.
Okay.
I can't believe that we've had six weeks of this talking about sex the whole time, and this is the first time that breast has been mentioned.
Well done. Actually, Bernie has just hit the meaning right on the head, because that's what it means.
Yeah.
Sucker through the breast.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Well,
So should we have a toast to, I don't know, to the Phaedrus? I mean, maybe to Platonic love. I don't know. Who wants to propose a toast?
Oh, no.
To a fun class?
To
To
what?
Plato.
Fun class.
To what?
Never mind.
Fun class.
Fun class. Oh, fun class. Okay. To well, to Plato. Let's Plato.
Plato.
Yeah.
I've got the School of Athens in the background, if you notice.
Yes,
Oh.
it's beautiful. Yeah,
Very
beautiful
good.
background, and how appropriate.
I love that background. Before you go, Effie, can I ask you a question? And you don't have to answer it today. Maybe you need time to think about it. Why do you like Donald Trump?
Oh no, it's a no Trump zone. It's a no Trump zone, Effie.
No, I'm happy to answer it, but it'll probably bring everyone else down. But you can feel free to contact me and we can discuss it anytime.
Okay.
Feel free to send me an email and I'm happy to make time to discuss it.
Okay, Effie.
Yeah.
Now,
We can Zoom each other or message each other and connect.
Can I
change the conversation?
Yes.
You said that you have an announcement to make, and I can't wait anymore.
Oh, David, off you go.
Well,
Then.
Suspense is killing me.
Off you go,
If
David.
no one has any more questions about the reading, or maybe we can just
come
as
on.
well.
Come on.
Yeah. Okay. So a few weeks ago, one of our students in the class, Jackie, one of our original students from way back, messaged us with a really interesting proposal. And after a little phone conversation, she's been working very hard and put together a little presentation, I suppose, that I guess you could go into more detail if you like, Jackie.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Look, I don't have a presentation as such, but I did kind of want to throw an idea towards everybody, which seems to have been taken quite nicely by those that, well, David and Bernie anyway, they're the only ones I've spoken to at this point. I actually wondered how many people might be interested in reading Plato to Greece. And yay! We would be, COVID, obviously. I'm thinking maybe 2022, because I'm thinking 2021's still going to be a question mark. But ideally, I think what would really be wonderful would be for us to take everything we've learned. Obviously, Bernie and David would still be setting readings for us while we're there, either to be completed before we're there, and then discussion at the sites amongst the ancient sites. But I think, incorporating places that are mentioned within the readings, such as Delos, such as Delphi, such as ancient...
Dodoni,
Yes, all of those areas. And I think connecting emotionally and physically with them whilst at the same time continuing to explore the Platonic readings or Plato's work. I just think that would be quite amazing. And I know that many of us probably have either, been to Greece or have maybe even been to some of these places. But I think part of traveling is the constant exploration. It's like you can read a book 3 times and constantly get completely different messages. And I think I'd like to see these places from a completely different vantage point. And I would like to see them from the vantage point of what we're studying now. And I thought I would, throw that into the mix and ask everybody how they feel about it.
Yep. In.
That's good.
Okay, excellent.
So Jackie and David have been working on a bit of an itinerary. We're looking at some themes and stuff. So we'll work on that a bit more. There's not that much of a hurry now that we're still in COVID, but it's great to see a little bit of enthusiasm about that. So,
great idea.
We'll keep you guys in mind if you're in classes or not. I've got your emails, and we'll let you know when things get more solid. Thanks, Jackie. That's great.
Thanks,
That's great.
Thank you, Jackie. That's a great idea.
Open to the idea. Thank you.
I actually had, I know I've got my drink in. There's so much in that it's just, I mean, it was great. It was great. This dialogue is fantastic.
Yeah.
And there's so much in there that was really resonant for me. And I just have to bring up a couple of things. So this thing about writing being like an image, you know, for those who have did the Republic, do you remember how, you know, of course, in the cave, you say that the things that we think, sensible things that we think are real in themselves are mere shadows of the forms. And so they're like images. They're like shadows or like images or like a reflection in the lake or whatever, and the divided line, whatever. But anyway, we all know that he has this analogy, and now he's saying writing's like that. Writing is a reminder also, a reminder. So remember that sensible things, we remember what we already knew. We remember the forms when we're born and we see things, we remember the forms in our sensible experience through sensible things. So, you know, in the same way that he used geometric diagrams to be the kind of the leg up into understanding how sensible things express forms, or the number two, as we've used, numbers, we've also got this relationship between writing and the logos written in our souls, right? The living logos, you know, and that's another thing as well. So did other people get that?
No, I got, what I got was that why did he never write things down? Because he felt that his ideas were living and always moving. And if he wrote it down, it's sort of just this one thought, it's been put and is permanently there, whereas he made a lot of speeches, but his speeches were living things which evolved with him as he himself grew as a person.
Yeah, well, and Kula, not just speeches, also like what was important for Socrates, often he says in Plato, he says, oh, we don't want long speeches. Let's have a discussion with a question and answer. So there's two souls, you know, engaging, isn't there? There's a livingness to that as well, isn't there, in the dialectic?
He was also mentioning another reason for not wanting to put things in writing is that things could be read by the wrong people at the wrong time, not when they're fully ready, and they can be misrepresented, and no one would be there to defend what is writing, what has been written. But I was thinking, well, in that case, you know, turn it into a sacred text that can be read by those who have some knowledge that you have trained. And because I always have in my mind, and especially in what I do, if it's not documented, it hasn't happened. It didn't happen. And this is with you know, like medications for a patient and things like that. If you haven't documented in writing, it hasn't happened. And also you have the Latins, verba volunt scripta manent. You know, words fly, but what is written stays. So it's a little bit, I was thinking, yeah, okay, I can see where you're going, but it's a pity. And if Plato hadn't written anything, we wouldn't be here now.
Well, what about if that was the whole idea? Because Socrates didn't write it down. Perhaps in a way, perhaps he thought it would be incriminating. He left it for Plato to write. And because Plato writes it with someone using someone else's words or someone else's voice, he can't be incriminated. And it was like that with Shakespeare. We used to say, how did he get away with this? And because he gave the voice to someone else. It wasn't his voice that was speaking. And I thought about this when I was reading, you know, when I've thought about why did Socrates not write it down? Who knows? They may have had an arrangement.
Yeah, well, actually, Kula, that sort of thing happened in the Renaissance, in the Renaissance times, where they did rediscover the dialogue and realize if I have a character, I've got a character who's an atheist, right? And he's going to make this argument, and then I'm going to cut him down. The other one's going to cut him down. And then you reread these things now, and you just think, hang on a sec. The atheist argument is actually really strong, and the dogmatic defense isn't very good. However, you know, they're getting it out there that way. So yeah, that's the thing. What I wanted to mention with that, so following from both of you, is this whole tradition in Christian tradition, that's all we've got, you know, I call it dead letter mysticism. And there is so many accounts of heretics, popular heretics, the kind of the mystics, some of them who couldn't even read or write, who said things like, I don't find my God in the dead letters written on the skins of animals, because it was written on whatever it's called, you know, leather. I find God within me. And they'd be saying this as they're being burned at the stake, because they're defying the priest and the authority, the whole political structure. And they're saying that it's within me. And so this is also in the Bible where it says, I will put my laws into their nous, into their minds, and write them in their hearts. And I will be their God, and they will be my people. So
isn't this to do with eros? I mean, going back to Plato, if we think of eros as the spirit of life, what you were talking about earlier on as life, as the river that goes through all creation, animal, plant, human, whatever, the life force, then to write something is trying to control that life force. But if you just leave the life force and you, in the present moment, you talk about it, you discuss it as Socrates does in his present moment, then you trust to the life force. And if the life force wants it to go, the river of life to flow on, then it will. And it has. You know, Plato came along and he did his thing. And here we're sitting here in the middle of COVID virus, you know, on Zoom. I mean, something that those people couldn't possibly have even imagined, you know, and that's all. This is the life force, is eros, you know, not thanatos, the spirit of death, which in a way is writing, is building, is controlling that force. But eros is the force of life that keeps on flowing and changing and adapting to circumstance. But within that eros is the truth, the one truth, the unchangeable truth.
Yeah.
And if we write, or if we, you know, construct something, in one sense, we're trying to control it, which means we're frightened of it.
Yes, and you know, this goes back to right at the end where he says, don't say that you're a writer. You're not identified as a writer. You're, what was it again? The real act that's behind that, which is the pursuit that underlies it. What's he say? Such a man ought to derive his title not from the writing, but from the serious pursuit that underlies the writing. And that's that, as you're saying, the living thing underneath. So always remember when you're reading the writing, another way of putting it, I suppose, is you read Plato now after 2,400 years, and you see it as pointing you know, and the allegories pointing the way, not actually literally saying it, showing. It gets back to saying and showing again. Thanks, Alexandra. That was really...
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to you then.
That's the wine.
I'd better have another sip. I'd better have another sip.
Because with writing, I tend to. I found that a little odd, I have to admit. And I understand where he was coming from, but at the same time, I remember thinking, well, but with writing, I can almost see. It's almost like the beauty in the writing would still be in the eye of the beholder, so to speak, because anything we read is our understanding based on where we are. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's this where you try to pin it down as a dogma, like you pin down a particular interpretation, like you do in a church, religion or whatever. That's where you make it dead, don't you? It's not an interaction with the text, where, like you say, you know, it's in the eye of the beholder. It's where you try and pin down the interpretation.
Yeah. So it's like when you and I'm actually really curious to do the Plato and Christianity, because I'm really I absolutely love Rumi, and I think you can read Rumi and you can read it. You can read the same poem 5 times, and depending on whether you're feeling depressed or whether you're feeling happy or whether you're feeling, you know, whatever you're feeling, it's a completely, you know, the interpretation is always different, but the love is still always there with Rumi. Yeah.
So it's how you write. It's not the actual writing. It's how you write. And I mean, we talked about symbols and divine geometry and things like that. You have symbols and divine representations of letters in actual writing. I don't see that's something dead. Depends how you write it, and you can write it as a discourse. I mean, this what Plato wrote. It's as fresh perhaps as it was 2000 plus years ago.
When I was reading it, Nietzsche came to mind, because his writing was completely misunderstood and horrible things came from the misunderstanding of his writing. And I think that's what he's trying to say, that you can write something that's positive, but if it gets into the wrong hands, it's going to turn against whatever it is you wanted to say in the first place. The other thing that came to mind for me was that Jesus had a way of actually speaking to different audiences using the same parable. So he kind of worded it in a way, which is an incredible skill, but he worded it in a way where he thought about all audiences at once, which is quite interesting as well.
Is that called speaking in tongues?
Go to the lowest common denominator.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's poetic, isn't it? It's poetic.
Simplicity appeals to people and people can understand. Yeah.
Because isn't that what makes a piece of work a classic? It's the universality of it. And whatever millennium we're in, it holds meaning for us because it has that universality, and that's why it's a classic. Like, you know, like what Plato wrote and what Aristotle wrote, and there's a poem by Gaddafi where he's, as a eulogy to his mother, those cold words, yours and mine, were never spoken. And whatever millennium you're in, those words hold so much beauty and meaning.
Can I ask something here as a journalist? Just the bit where he talks about the purpose of writing is to remind or to entertain. I just want to say, maybe Maria, you can answer to this. Where does then come in stuff like the hieroglyphics, which just explain things that are happening, like news, like now? You know, where does that fit into those two things that Socrates is supposed to be talking about? Was he only talking about one type of writing, maybe?
Hieroglyphics, are you talking about ideograms compared to...
Yeah, that actually explains something that happened, to depict a story that's not a reminding story and maybe not intended to be entertainment, but is just, this is something that happened. And, you know...
How is that different from writing with characters, with signs?
It's just, I would have thought the same thing. You know, you tell a story, you're doing it by putting it down somewhere. So, but I don't see where into those two things, telling of an event as what we call news today fits into that at all.
Well, they were recording, for example, you can take that as an announcement, maybe economics, the produce of the year, and you know, how many kettles and how much wheat and things like that. But they were also recording medicine and instructions for the journey in the afterlife. So the instructions in...
That's what he meant by remind, to remind future people about it.
Yeah.
He is actually talking about journalism. I just didn't read it like that. It just didn't come across to me like that as being what he meant. But if that's what he meant, that's great. That fits in.
I mean, they used to have quite a bit of propaganda for the leaders, because there are evidence of them crossing out leaders with new leader when new leaders came along.
Yeah.
Well, can I just say, Phil, when I say the word justice, right, doesn't that remind you of what you already know? In that sense, in the Platonic sense? Doesn't it remind you of what you already know, which is what justice is?
Some people may not have that knowledge if they've grown up under a totalitarian state, or they have not known this is. Take someone out of say the Metaxas era in Greece who did not live before that long era. They may not know what justice is, and they may be surprised by it. I mean, there's an innate assumption that people know it. If it's...
Oh, okay. Now, maybe it's not sort of saying that everyone has the same idea of justice, but maybe if I say the word cup, then, you know, like if I say the word cup, right, it reminds you of what you already know. You know, there's a certain very fundamental way in which language reminds you of things that you already know. And so I think, I like to think that what Plato is talking about is a logos, right? That is, which is the essence of knowing, that is non-linguistic.
So maybe
non-language.
You mean?
So,
you mean, so yeah, the knowledge is that you are, as we heard earlier, that you are born with, that are innate. Is that what you mean?
Oh, well, no, that maybe you've developed, you know, you've developed this knowledge. So you've just learned something, new yesterday, and then you refer to it. It's referring to something you already know. It's just something really, really ordinary. And you say, okay, you've made, if we get back to the distinctions, the, you know, classifications of things. So maybe you've got a new flower in your garden, and now you know what plant that is. You know, you've learnt that. And so when you refer to it next time, you're referring to something you already know, a distinction that you've already made, which is beyond the language. It's beyond the language, isn't it? See, this is where Plato, and this is where Derrida, you know, the modern skeptic Derrida, doesn't understand that with Plato anyway, whether you agree with it or disagree with it or not, that semiotics, signs are great for communication and everything, but the fundamental level of knowledge is non-linguistic. It's making these distinctions. It's making the, bringing things together and putting the cuts in the right place, you know. It's going back to that. And so when you talk and when you write or whatever, when you use language, you're going back to something that is beyond the language. So, yeah, going back to distinctions.
How does that fit in? I've just read Leonard Cottrell's book about Minos and my seminar, Minos with Evans, doing that stuff I didn't know about, you know, detail of it. How is that reminding me of something of which I knew little?
Well, look, if you read, I suppose if you read a word that you don't understand, you don't know what it is, it doesn't remind you of anything. But when you try and get a conception of it, you know, what does knack mean? You know, like, you know, it's reminding you of something you know, or you're creating, or you're making new knowledge for yourself. You're making a new distinction. So I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
I'm referring to, say, a fact that you didn't know that is within the word, that the words are referring to, that you didn't know about. The words you understand, you know, you're reminded of the words, but what are the words conveying? They're conveying to you something you didn't know.
Okay, well, this is where I would take it back, and this is I'm confident this is Platonic, to that thing I think I might have done some of you guys did the reading Plato, where you think about a time when your knowledge expanded. Like, for example, when you go to Aunt Agnes's farm and she's got chickens have all got their names, right? They've all got names, and you arrive and you go, what the fuck? They all look the same. And then you stay there for 2 weeks, right? And then, of course, they're different. Of course, they've got names. You know, you go into a forest for the first time that you're unfamiliar with. Everything looks the same. And then, so your experience actually changes. And you make the distinctions, you make the cuts in the places. You say, okay, Betsy's different than Dottie, you know, or Bossy's different because she's always bossy. You know, you make the distinctions between the chickens, right? You've got the same sensible experience, but you make those distinctions. So it's reminding you of the things you already know. I know what a cup is. I've got my idea of justice. I can say, is that just? Is that unjust? I think I know what justice is, right? Okay, something new here. Then you make new distinctions. So and those distinctions are made from what you already know. They come from what you already know. Oh, it's like, you know, a zebra is a bit like a horse, but with stripes, you know, or something. You know, you kind of, you develop your distinctions out of what you already know. I think that's more Platonic. It's not this idea that there is this material reality out independent from you, right? That you then are referring to what's called the correspondence theory of truth. It's not that. It's that you have your experience and you generate, you don't cause your experience. That's your sensible experience is caused externally, but you make the distinctions yourself. You're the one making them.
Does Plato anywhere, does Socrates talk about the necessity for your judgment or your mind or your perception to always be open and to be listening? I mean, if we come to Phil's book about Minos, for that to have a sort of awakening within him about something he remembers, then you've got to be open to allowing whatever that book is trying to convey to you, to convey something to you where you are at that particular time in your life. So that part of listening to Socrates or Plato or whoever it is you must have an ability to remain open and curious and to want to learn. And if you have those sort of ingredients, then you're going to remember more, because you're not trying to put up barriers and you know what I'm sort of trying to say?
Well, I would say you're going to make the right distinctions. If you pay attention,
yes, pay attention
to make the right distinction. Yes. The better attention you pay, the better.
Does Socrates talk about that? About paying attention, being open, being curious?
I'm just trying to think of somewhere that. Yeah. Well, curious.
I mean, why are his
wonder, yes.
Wonder's the same thing.
Yes.
Why are his disciples always ready to listen to him? Why aren't there some disciples that say, no, that's not right, that's not what the state says, we're not going to listen to you? You know, within Plato, they're always willing to listen to Socrates, but in life, there are people who are not willing to listen or pay attention, but are closed. So those people are not going to pick up Leonard Cotterell's book and be amazed by it or wondered by it or have their mind expand, because they're closed, you know. And I just wondered whether Socrates, whether he calls it paying attention or whatever he uses, whether he talks about that sort of coming to a possibility of hearing truth. You know, what sort of attitude you must have.
There was, what about, sorry?
I'm just saying the unexamined life is not worth living.
Okay.
I think it's implicit in a lot of things he says, you know, like inquire, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool, sorry.
Oh,
I had a summary of, sorry.
I was just saying, what about our, we have an inherent, you know, sense of things that, like an inherent sense of freedom or an inherent sense of justice. And, you know, in the novel Beloved, where the slave who's has worked for one person all her life, she was born into the situation, and then finally they let her go. She was 65 years old, and she didn't want to go because she'd always had a very good life with these people. And then as they drove away, she felt a weight lift off her chest, and for the first time she understood the meaning of the word freedom. And you know, we say in Greek, eleftheria είναι μια λέξη που σε βγάζει από τα ρούχα σου. It's a word that just lifts you up out of your skin, so to speak. And she understood the meaning of freedom, and she loved being free, and she felt that freedom, and she realized that freedom is a right. It's not a self-righteous wish.
So this was like a basic thing that she learned very late in her life, I guess.
Yeah, and but there's this but there's also this inherent sense of you know, this belongs to me, or this is how we should be.
Yeah, inherent in her. Yeah. Okay. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken who wants to butt in? Because I know we're all talking over each other. Tini, have you got anything you want to say about the reading at all?
Not so much about the reading, but just kind of drawing on this conversation about, is it really trying to say also that there's not everything can be sort of explained literally, like through like laws and science too. You know, that there's a kind of, you know, like we're talking how there's an innate understanding of things, and is that kind of the point he's trying to push as well, is that, you know, there's more to it than what can be literally explained.
Yes, yes, more to it that can be literally explained. That's right. So language is pointing. Language ultimately is pointing. That's right. It's pointing to the forms and the constructions of the forms, you know, the complexity of the forms that how we create our sensible world and so on. Yeah, I think that's very important. What I might do now, I'm just curious with people, and I know, who have I got? Phil and Fatini and a few other people who haven't done the Republic. So I do apologize, but maybe it's helpful. Anyway, just how do we compare the tripartite soul with the Chariot? I mean, Maria mentioned this in her discussion of the Chariot. I mean, does it compare well? I haven't heard people discuss it in the commentaries. Do people think it compares well?
I don't know. I think it's a little too clean cut, a little too basic, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty similar. Of course, a little bit different context, but it was there, the three elements, the reason, the themos, and the desire.
Funny, because this actually sort of reminds me of how astrology set out. You have, there was the one about logic, which is supposed to represent Mercury. Then you have the one about feelings and I'm guessing that's sort of like relationships, which would be Venus. And then Mars represents the appetite and energy one.
Right.
So it seems like that. It sort of seems like there's a parallel there. I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not.
And it's identical to the Hindu gunas, the sattva, the rajas, and the tamas. That's the sattva is the life force in everything. Rajas is the action, and tamas is the death or the falling apart.
Oh, okay. So we pronounce Maria. It's Thamus. Thamus is the one that's related to the white horse. Thamus. Is that right?
Oh, Themos. Yes, Dr. Thimoides. Yes.
Yeah.
The spirit.
What it does is give great importance to that, and that's when I teach this, that's the one that people find most difficult to understand. And I remember in the Republic, Socrates says, well, like, think about it. When you've got that desire, the desire just to have sex or just to eat or whatever, and then you've got the resistance to that. Well, that's the thumos. And it's the most difficult to define. People but yeah, in Plato, it's in both of them. It's kind of the most important, isn't it? The white horse is very important.
And the motivation too, the driving force.
It's a driving force for good or whatever. Or
yes.
Up
exactly.
Yes, all the way up to the highest form of love. Yeah.
So then, is it also representative, I guess, and I'm really just asking, of a balance? Could you say that? Like, I see it almost like balance. Like, one is pulling forward, and the other one is then trying to kind of say, well, hang on, let's think about this almost. Have I understood it, or is that just how I'm seeing it?
Does someone else want to take that one up?
I think they're out of kilter in that respect. Only the gods have the two well-balanced steers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's saying that there's an inherent conflict in the soul, and you've got to sort this out, guys. You know, you've got to sort it out. You've got this, got the kind of it's kind of like the, you know, some people say the animalistic desires, you know, the passions, the emotions and everything, and you've got to rise above them and rise towards the gods, you know. And rise in this way with the white horse, which will just lead me on to something else I just had to mention. So this dialogue, I remember Derrida in his thing, that was the other thing I read last night. He says, oh, people used to say this was a pretty crappy dialogue and it wasn't really given much prominence, but now I'm going to give it prominence it was never given. Well, in the Renaissance, it had this huge prominence. And if you saw the website, I put a quote from the Oration on the Dignity of Man, probably the most famous document from the Renaissance, expressing humanism with a quote from this dialogue. And big in the Renaissance, in the early Renaissance in Florence, and as it expanded out, was this notion of, from this dialogue, of the four furies. They called them the four furies. And so it was there was an aspiration to get enthused with a fury so that you could head towards the divine. So it was kind of it was a big thing in the Renaissance. And if you're interested in this sort of stuff, it's a bit outdated now, but it kind of started a whole new area of research. Frances Yates, look her up. She was writing, she was an independent scholar. She wasn't at a university. She was writing in the late 60s and early 70s. And she wrote about this whole revival of Platonism and Hermeticism and Rosicrucianism, if I can say that correct. Fascinating stuff. But yeah, this dialogue and those four furies, that was really big in the revival of Plato and the revival of the old wisdom in the Renaissance.
Guys, I'm going to have to go. Have a good 2 weeks break, and I'll see you.
We'll see you at the Plato and Christianity, isn't it?
Yeah.
Good time.
3 weeks.
Look forward to seeing you again, Effie.
See you all.
See you, Effie.
See ya.
Okay, see you.